Singapore is one of the richest, most modern and luxurious cities in the world, but also one of the most expensive. So on this channel, I document my journey of building my life of freedom around the world. And earlier this year, I got the chance to visit Singapore because it's a place that I'm considering making a little bit of base into at some point in the future. So is Singapore a place that you should consider going to if you are a remote worker, an online business owner, or is it simply overhyped and overpriced? On the surface, Singapore has a lot of amazing things. Fantastic food, big modern city, high quality of life, extremely safe, warm weather. But when I was there, I also discovered many potential downsides of Singapore. I'm based in Dubai in the winter, but the problem with Dubai is that in the summer it is scorchingly hot. So sort of my idea is that I'm gonna find two places in the world that I'm gonna call home, because that also for me is a much better lifestyle because I enjoy living in different places around the world. So really when I went to Singapore, the point was not to like be a tourist and do all the touristy stuff, to see what life there would be like, to try living my normal life there, to see if I would enjoy it. So my first impression of getting out of the airport in Singapore was a lot of sweat. Basically in Singapore, like whenever you go outside, if it's during the middle of the day, the first thing you will notice is this massive wall of heat. The temperatures are like 30 to 32 degrees, like pretty much entire year round. It's also massively humid, and the sun there is super powerful. So if you don't enjoy hot climates, like Singapore is probably not the place for you, right? So in terms of the city, the first impressions I have that everything is super clean and just polished and modern. It's one of those places just like Dubai where everything just works and like they really take care of the city, which for me personally is super important. I really love that. In terms of things to do, my first impression that the city actually felt quite boring, that there wasn't that much to do. Again, I'm contrasting this to Thailand, which is where I had just come out of. Like there's even the stereotype of Singapore is that it's like the city to do business in, but it's not the city to like have an adventure in or to live in or something like that. And I could definitely feel that. But then when I sat down and I thought about my actual life, like in many ways, like I'm the most boring person in the world. Like the thing I enjoy doing the most is just sitting down and working, like making these YouTube videos and coding my apps and like things like this. So for me, from a place to live, having a ton of things to do doesn't actually matter that much. That sort of wears off quite quickly. The location where I live most of the year is Dubai. Dubai as a city is like a freaking amusement park. Like everything you could ever want in terms of things to do is there, yet I never actually use it. So that shows that for me, these things to do is really an overrated thing. It's not really something that's important in terms of actual living. So if we are to evaluate Singapore as a potential place to live, we can't just look at the usual things that people look at in different cities, like the things to do, like things like this. We need an actual framework. And so for the rest of this video, we'll go through my framework of what are the things that I look at in a place to potentially move to or move to part-time. Now you can pick parts of my framework into your one, but I recommend that you build your own based on the things that are important to you, because the things that are important to me are going to be different from things that are important to you. But let's do it. Before we get into that though, if you want to follow my life around the world and see what it's actually like to be in these places as I travel around, I highly recommend you follow me on Instagram. Over there, I not only show my adventures around the world, but I also give you behind the scenes look into my business, what I'm doing, and you also get to connect with me on a more intimate basis. So go follow me on Instagram in the first link in the description. So what I realized is that there are certain objective factors that make a city a great city to live, and there's certain subjective factors that are really just things that I like, but that not necessarily everyone else like. In terms of objective things, we can look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That this is basically like a framework that tells us what are the things that humans want, what are the things that make a human's life good and great. Basically at the very lowest levels, we have things like safety. One of our more basic needs is that we just want to be safe. Like I think every human would prefer a safe city to a non-safe city, and Singapore is one of the safest cities in the world, so we can definitely tick that box. And the reason for that is that just like in Dubai, the laws around any crime and things like this are extremely strict. Like believe it or not, they actually enforce their laws. They actually make their citizens not commit crimes, unlike unfortunately in a lot of the West, which is a big reason why at the moment I don't really want to live in the West, because it's just going in the wrong direction in terms of crime and all of this. Hopefully it turns around, but right now places like Singapore are the kinds of places I'm looking for, and safety is one big reason why. And in that same category, we've got security. And I also look at just like personal freedom and like financial security, like my ability to just live freely without them taxing me to death. These are all really important things to me. So if you look at Singapore, even though it is a very strict country in terms of their laws, in terms of business, in terms of like freedom to do business, I think it's ranked as like the highest country in the world in terms of a place to do business. And because I'm in the stage of my life where that's really important to me, again, Singapore gets a big plus, and it's a reasonably low tax country as well. I think the rate is like 22% or something like that, which for me is completely reasonable. In terms of cost of living though, yeah, it is very, very expensive. If you just look at the average cost of rent for a 1-bedroom, like Singapore is, I think, is in the top 10 in the world. It's like $3,000 a month on average, which even in Dubai is only like $2,000 a month. So it's much, much more expensive than even Dubai, which is already a pretty expensive place. You're very low income, Singapore probably doesn't make sense simply because of the financial side of things. But if you're very high income, it might make a lot of sense because you can enjoy the low taxes, and the sort of absolute cost of living probably doesn't matter that much to you at that stage. And then we've got sort of connection. So what is the likelihood that I can find friends and to find a partner that I like? And I would say Singapore is a very international place. It's a very entrepreneurial place. So if you are entrepreneurial like I am, I think Singapore is probably one of the better places to be because it has a lot of other people like that. Now, in terms of subjective things that I personally like, first of them is warm climate. Like I personally really like warm climate. I would say the climate in Singapore is actually slightly too hot. Like I wish it was a bit milder, but still, like overall, I don't have an issue with the heat. I mean, I live in Dubai, so you could probably guess that already. But if you don't like warm climate, then that is obviously going to be a minus. The next on my list, I have a city with lots going on. I really like being in a city. Just my preference. I like being in a city, and that is that. And Singapore is an amazing city, lots going on, very modern. I like walking around when there's a lot of buildings around, when there's other people, so it definitely ticks the box there. I like the place to feel modern. Singapore is super modern. A lot of people might not like that. A lot of people might prefer like Europe, for example, because it's a lot more historic. You have a lot more history. I don't really get it. So for me, that's not important. And then there's a lot of things just around the apartment. Like I want to have a nice apartment that's walkable to a lot of restaurants, nice areas to walk in. I like to have a view, great Wi-Fi, things like this. And obviously in Singapore, I'm going to have to pay a lot to get all the things, but I can get them. So far things look very positive, right? But there are just two problems. It is prices, and there is also another problem. What I need to consider is that I could get like most of, probably like 80-90% of what Singapore offers for like a third or a fourth of the cost in neighboring either Bangkok or Kuala Lumpur or something like that. So it's highly possible that in the near future, if I'm looking for a base in Asia, I'm going to end up choosing either Kuala Lumpur or Bangkok or like another city in Thailand, maybe Bali or something like that, simply because of the cost. But if I'm thinking long term, when I'm at the stage where costs matter less, then Singapore might indeed be a really great option. But there is also another issue. And this is probably the biggest issue with getting into Singapore, and that is how are you going to get a visa. Now in the big picture, I'm a big fan of Singapore in terms of how they do immigration, because Singapore is just a small city-state. Basically, they've recognized is that their biggest and most valuable resource is their talent, and so they do it in exactly the right way, where they attract the right people, aka the people that are gonna make them money, the people that are doing well, the people that are wealthy, but they don't just accept anyone in there, unlike in Europe where they tend to do it in the complete opposite way. But the thing with Singapore is that even if you watch this video now and you're like, yeah, I really want to move there, it's not as simple as just going there, because you do need to get a visa. So unless you're going there to work a job like for a company, that's a whole different thing, but I'm not looking to do that. So then you need to look into the self-employment options, where basically, like, long story short, I think I would have two options. Either I would have to go there to like form a tech company and get VC funding, and if I can prove that, then they would give me this like entree pass where I can get in. That would be one option, but it's unlikely that I'm gonna do that. So the other option, which is possible but also probably very expensive, is that I would have to form a company in Singapore and then essentially employ myself by that company, and then a certain minimum salary would be like $20,000 a month or something like that. I would have to pay myself from my own company in order to get this like employment pass via my own company. So as long as I could fulfill those requirements, I could do it. So overall, for my preferences, and admittedly based on a very limited amount of experience over there, I think Singapore is largely the closest thing that I could see for like a perfect city. But the thing is that right now, it probably doesn't make sense for me to sort of pay the cost of being there and the cost of actually being able to get in. So probably Singapore is not the place that I'm going to be looking at right now, but it could be something that I'm looking at sometime in the future. So I just thought I'd share that in case you're considering Singapore as just from the point of view of an online business owner. What are the kinds of things that I'm looking at? So maybe you got something out of this video that you can like add to your own framework of how you're choosing where to live. If, however, you're curious about Dubai, which is where I actually live most of the year, you can also watch this video to learn about how Dubai compares to London, which is yet another city where I lived before. So you can watch that to compare those two cities and then compare it to Singapore based on this video to make up your mind of what could be the right place for you.